Thank you, Madam Chair. You are now live.
Great, thanks, Simon. Hey, hi, everybody. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Thanks, everybody, for attending. We do have quorum. So our first order of business is to approve the minutes from our April 28th meeting. Can I get a motion for that, please? No, apparently not. Jennifer, thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Sutter. Thank you. Approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. So that is our order of business for today. And I wanted to talk briefly to both the clerk and staff about this to see if you think that there's any merit in switching the agenda a little bit so the people that are on the line for the two, well, let me see what those items are. Hold on, I got to scroll way down. For item 9.1.2 and item 9.1.3, if it makes sense to do those first and then get to, because I know that we're going to be probably in a little bit more of a lengthy discussion about center plan. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that, or if Simon, you can advise whether or not this is the time to do that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, this is definitely time we can discuss the option to do that. I think that, yeah, where there's potentially a chance that the committee is going to have a lot of discussion on the center plan, it may make sense to push that to behind the first, well, the other two items. I'll let staff comment in terms of if they have any thoughts or concerns, but yeah, we can definitely do that.
Sure.
Thanks, Madam Chair. For me, I'll just comment from the staff perspective. That's fine from the center plan for myself and the center plan team. If you want to do, if the committee wishes to deal with the other heritage items first, I'll stick around. I'll be here.
Okay, that sounds great. Simon, I assume that that's I need to make a motion and then, or someone needs to make a motion and we vote, or?
Yes, we would just make a motion to approve the order of business with that change included in that, and we would then, yeah, just push those two items up first. Okay,
I can't make a motion, can I? Or can
I? Yeah, if someone else can make the motion, that.
Okay, so if someone could make the motion that item 9.1.2 and then item 9.1.3 be put in front of item 9.1.1, that would be.
This is Marisha, and I will make the motion to put 9.1.2 and 9.1.3 in to consult with those first instead of 9.1.1.
I'll second.
Thanks, Councillor Stoddard. Okay, so that is our order of business then. The next is business arising.
Just briefly have to vote on that.
Oh, we have to vote on it. Sorry, my apologies.
No trouble.
Okay, all those, let's just do, if people could just say aye, that would be great. Or just say whatever you say when I say the thing. Oh my gosh, okay, 1 second. All those in favor of reorganizing the order of business, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Contrary minded? Excellent. Okay, that motion carries. Now we will move along. Business arising out of the minutes. I don't believe that there was any. Call for a declaration of conflict of interest. I mentioned this already to Simon, so he knows that this is the case. For item 9.1.2, Patrick, who I don't see on the line actually. What happens when the vice chair isn't here? Or is Lois my vice chair? Lois, are you my vice chair?
I believe Patrick is the vice chair.
It is Patrick.
Where Patrick potentially, if he is unable to join this meeting, then we would just appoint an acting chair. That can be done by a simple vote. And
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to need to do that then, unless Patrick comes on in the next little while here. I do need to declare conflict of interest for case or item 9.1.2 on the agenda. So somebody will just need to take over once we get into that. That'll be our first item now that we've reorganized the agenda. Simon, does it make sense to do that vote now, or should we do it when we get there?
For the item, what we would recommend is just you would. Oh, well, we can potentially do that. Why don't we just do that now?
Sure.
I think we'll reflect in the minutes at that point in time. But yeah, we can just consider the appointment of an acting chair for the for that item now.
Okay. I would like to nominate Lois. She used to do this job, so I think she knows what's going on.
We hope.
It's just one item.
That's fine. Yep.
Okay, all those, can I just take a vote, or unless anybody else wants to nominate anybody else? Sorry, I'm trying to be egalitarian here. Nope, okay, great. All those in favor of Lois acting vice chair for this meeting of the Heritage Advisory Committee?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Okay, perfect. Thank you, Lois, for agreeing to do that. I'll let you know when we can switch over and you can take over here. Does anybody else have any declaration of conflict of interest that they'd like to make at this time? Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Consideration of deferred business. There is none. Correspondence, petitions, and delegations. It doesn't seem that there is any. Simon, can you confirm?
That's correct.
Okay, great.
Oh, sorry. I should jump in and just say for correspondence, actually, we have received a couple of pieces of correspondence.
Oh,
Those have been circulated to all members of community council. Sorry, it's been a while. It doesn't happen too frequently at HAC, but yes, those have all now been circulated.
Right. Okay. So all of those letters that everyone received, and everyone should have received those sometime earlier this week or last week, if my memory serves me. They were letters from members of the public and various people. I think mostly regarding the item 9.1.1 on our agenda. Okay, great. So those will be something that we'll consider when we're talking about that item, or should we consider them now?
Sorry, Madam Chair. One of the items, 7.1.1, was the twinning of Norfolk, Virginia and HRM, and a request for a contact person or participation or material to be shared. It may be past its best buy date because it came in it was circulated to us in late May. Simon, can you clarify for the chair? Simon?
Sorry about that. So just to make sure that I'm following, this relates to the correspondence item. I'm sorry, can you repeat which item that piece of correspondence that relates to?
Yes, it was the International Village was the subject.
Yes, that's right.
The twinning of Norfolk and HRM.
I can confirm I have reached out to the sender in that case, the correspondee. This correspondence was also, I believe, circulated through the mayor's office, and we did believe that they were the more appropriate body for in a more immediate response to this request. But I did indicate that I would circulate it as a formality to HAC to ensure that they were in the loop. The committee was in the loop for that.
Through the chair. Thank you, Simon.
Thanks, Lois. Okay, anybody else have anything that they wanted to flag? I believe that the rest of them are in regards to center plan.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So let's maybe park those, and we'll maybe get into them once we start talking about center plan and after we've seen staff's presentation, and then we can have a conversation about each of those items of correspondence, if that makes sense to everybody.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. I just wanted to let the committee know that I just sent an email to Councillor Cuddle to see if she's been held up or she's able to attend.
Wonderful, thank you.
You're welcome.
We do still have quorum, correct, Simon?
Yes, that's correct. We
Okay.
do have quorum.
Just checking. Yeah, it'd be nice to have Councillor Cuddle here, though. Absolutely. Okay, great. So information items brought forward. This is item 8 on our agenda. There are none. Now we're going to jump into reports and discussion. Item 9.1 is reports and discussion from staff. So we're going to item 9.1.2 right now. And so Lois, I'm going to let you take over in welcoming staff and then leading the discussion for this. And I will just sit quietly and listen. Lois, you're on mute.
Yes, I am. Now I'm not. Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 9.1.2 is an application by ZAP Consulting, Inc. for a development agreement at 1029 South Park, which would allow a multi-unit residential addition to a municipally registered heritage property. And the recommendations are that we give notice of the motion to consider, that we approve the proposed development agreement, and we require the development agreement to be signed by the property owner. Somebody from HRM, I presume, is ready to give us some background on this. It's an interesting project. I walk by it almost every day. I wondered when it was going to come to HAC, and here it is. So.
Yes, Madam Chair. I'm trying to share my screen here, but I'm unable. I don't know what's going on.
Sorry, Paul. Just. Sorry, Paul, I've just promoted you and you should receive screen sharing abilities shortly.
Yes. Yes. So here we are. Can you all see this?
Yes, we can, or at least I can, Paul.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, members of the Heritage Advisory Committee. My name is Paul Boucher, and I will be presenting case number 23186, which is a development agreement request for a municipally registered heritage property at 1029 South Park Street. An application has been received by ZAP Consultant to obtain a development agreement to construct a 2.5-story addition with a maximum of 6 dwelling units, as well as to locate an additional unit in the Clark Halliston House to increase the number of units from 10 to 11. This would result in the project having a total of 17 units. Now, the Clark Halliston House was constructed in 1895. The property is zoned R2A, which is a general residential commercial zone. It's located in the south end plan area of the Halifax secondary plan. The property is 720 square meters in size. It's at the corner of Rowland Street and South Park Street. And here we see the property in blue. We have Rowland Street and South Park Street. And as you can see, there is a variety of residential uses in the surrounding area, everything from single unit dwellings to multiple unit dwellings containing up to 245 units in it. And if you see here along Inglis Street, there are registered heritage properties all along the street. And these buildings contain anywhere between 1 and 6 units in them. And this section of Inglis Street is also a municipally registered streetscape. Now, the addition will take place by altering an enclosed stairwell constructed in 1994. It's in this location here, and the addition will be attached to the Clark Halliston House at the same location as the stairwell. The only part of the Clark Halliston House which will be altered will be this staircase here, and it's to ensure that the addition can be added to the house. Now, no character defining elements of the existing heritage building will be changed or removed. The only part that will be changed is this here, which is not considered to be a character defining element. Now, the designation on the property is medium density residential. It encourages a mix of residential uses ranging from single to multiple unit dwellings, and the buildings are not to have more than 4 stories. It also supports interior conversions, additions, infill between existing structures. Now, the enabling policy for the project is policy 6.8. In policy 6.8, it's to encourage the adaptive reuse of municipally registered heritage properties. And this policy allows for the consideration of land uses on those properties which are not permitted by the underlying zone or land use designation, subject to certain conditions. Now, in this case, the proposed 17 units is not permitted under the existing zone. So policy 6.8 also has, if you look down at the last point here, policy 6.8 also has provisions that any development substantially complies with the policies of the Halifax Secondary Municipal Planning Strategy. So these standards and guidelines. Now, the Regional Municipal Planning Strategy policy requires that council ensure that new developments on heritage properties by development agreement be evaluated against the standards and guidelines. Most of the standards in this case do not apply, as none of the character defining elements will be removed or changed. However, standard 11 and 12 specifically pertain to the addition. Now, for standard 11, it's the staff's opinion that the project meets the standards and guidelines. The project is distinct, complementary, and subordinate to the Clark Halliston House, as well as the heritage buildings in the area. As far as standard 12, since the new addition will join the Clark Halliston House by an enclosed staircase at the rear of the building, it will not impact the integrity of the heritage building if it is removed. We had public engagement, and if you look at in your package, there should be an attachment C, which is engagement summary. It summarizes the comments and the concerns that were received. So what we did is that we had a web page set up, and we had a neighborhood mail out. We mailed out 609 notifications. We received 7 responses. I won't go through them all. I'll just list a couple of the supporting and the concerns. So some of the supporting comments were that the addition does not substantially change the external features of the original building. The proposal maintains the setback of the existing heritage property. The dimensions of the addition are subordinate to the existing heritage building. We also had some concerns, and some of those concerns were that the project was not sensitive to the heritage property or historic properties along Inglis Street, that the material is not complementary to existing buildings. There's no attempt to mimic the style of the building. The building is too large for the property, as well as the rooftop deck will add to the noise and loss of privacy. There were also concerns regarding a lack of parking, on-site parking, increased traffic, and as well as the impact on the construction in the area as far as noise and dust and debris. I'd just like to point out at this time that once we received our comments, we did get together with the applicant, and there were some changes made from the original application, such thing as originally there was metal siding to be placed on the building, and that was changed to a cement board, which more closely resembles cedar shakes. And as well, the metal roofing was replaced by shingles that match what's on the existing Clark Halliston house. The style of the windows were also changed to more closely mimic what was on the Heritage Building. The windows on the Heritage Buildings are narrower and longer, so they did make them narrower and longer. And they also arranged them in a manner that's complementary on the existing Clark Halliston house. There's a bay window, and so they rearranged some of the windows to kind of complement that aspect of the Heritage Building. And they also added color to the cement board. They added gray, and they also had some off-white between the floors to match what's on the Clark Halliston house. Now, where are we in the process? Well, right now, today we're at the recommendation from the Heritage Advisory Committee. And our next step would be first reading at Community Council and the public hearing and a decision on the development agreement. The proposal was presented to, back in January 25th of this year at the Halifax Peninsula Planning Advisory Committee, and they reviewed the proposal and they recommended that the Halifax and West Community Council approve the application. So what we are looking for today is a recommendation to give notice of the motion to consider the proposed development agreement as set out in attachment A to allow a 2.5-story multi-unit residential addition to the existing building located at 1029 South Park Street. Approve the proposed development agreement, which shall be substantially the same as the form as set out in attachment A, and require the development agreement to be signed by the property owner within 240 days. So are there any questions or comments?
Thank you very much, Paul. That was a helpful introduction and overview. The heritage property itself is magnificent. It has a lovely garden and it's set back in the front. Your presentation presents some interesting aspects. I had questions. I think some other people may have questions. I'll start off, and you did answer most of my questions in the detailed presentation. I'm drowning in documents for today's meeting, but somewhere among my 3 or 4 inch pile, I read that to encourage smaller developers, that proposals with 12 or fewer units did not have to provide parking. But this development is, I think, 17 units as proposed, and it does offer no parking. Am I wrong in my interpretation there?
No, you're correct. However, again, section 6.8 of the MPS does allow us to does allow uses on the lot which are normally not permitted. And in this case, they would have to provide, in a normal case, they would have to provide parking, but in this case, they do not. Now, I do know that the owner of this project has owns a property, I think a block up, and they have ample parking within that building. They have an oversupply of parking. And I know that the building across the street also has parking available.
That's useful, and I understand what you mean, that the policy is a loophole for development in established areas where we're looking to preserve heritage. So thank you very much, Paul. Other people, questions and comments? You should see his rhododendron bushes out front. They are spectacular. Jennifer?
Hi, I have a question just to build on the parking question. I get the fact that there is, parking available in other areas that this developer may own, but will there be some kind of an agreement in place that if one of these properties exchange hands, that there'll still be a parking agreement between the two buildings?
No, not to my knowledge. We haven't looked at that.
Am I the only one that's?
Sorry, through Madam Chair, I can expand on that a little bit. Since this would be a private agreement that would be internal to the property owner, we would ask that the committee not consider that as part of their discussions. We have to assume that if the property ever changed hands, that access to the parking would go away. So I would suggest that we look at this as if there is no parking provided.
Thank you. That makes sense to me.
Are there other questions or comments? Paul, could you pull up the slide which shows the west elevation of the proposed addition so that we can see what the front looks like?
Yes, dear.
I did notice that all 7 respondents, which not many respondents out of the number of inquiries which were sent out, but all 7 respondents said it was not in keeping with the historic building on the property. And you outlined some of the changes that had been made. Could we just look at that slide again, please?
Yes, can you see the slide here?
I can see you.
My apologies. Can you see this slide?
No, there we are, yes. And it may be one of the next slides.
The original.
That one shows part of the elevation. The front elevation. Can you go to the next slide in the deck? Or did we miss something there? I think maybe the members of the committee would like to see a good frontal view of the proposed addition. That's the current house.
This is what I have here. This is the addition here with the Clark Halliston house with the Heritage Building.
But just 1 minute here to lie. There it is. Sorry. Yeah, I had to minimize something. Okay. Anybody have questions or concerns about that perspective? Bearing in mind that about a year ago, the house around the corner on Inglis Street, the Italianate house, which was to have an addition at the corner of Inglis and forget what the cross street is. That new structure is there now, and it harmonizes very well with the Italianate building. We were concerned at the time, I recall, and we were persuaded, and there were some changes made, and I think people are quite satisfied with how it fits into the landscape now. Are there any questions or concerns about the appearance of this structure? And I think my only one would be that we're losing the Queen Anne features, the rotunda, the tower effect. That is not carried over in any way. But the, and I don't know what we would call the triangular, it's not a pediment. I don't know. Any questions or concerns, or do we move to
I think
someone?
Cassandra has her hand up.
I'm sorry, can't see that.
That's okay, Lois. I'll thank you. I'll just jump in. I agree that the Queen Anne features obviously are lost. And I know that, Paul, thank you for the presentation, that you did have discussions with them and they made changes to the cladding and the window shape and that sort of thing. Was there any discussion about setting back the third floor so that it wasn't one plane, that all three and a half stories are not all one plane?
No, we didn't have those discussions. We did feel that as presented this way here, that it actually was it looks a little bit more modern, but we were happy with what was presented.
Okay. To me, it feels a little bit stark. And, you know, if the whole building was set back a little bit so that there was even a bit of garden space, shrubbery, something to soften it up a little bit, it definitely is modern. It definitely is modern. It just doesn't appeal. I hear that they've met all of the requirements. It doesn't appeal to my personal taste, I guess. And that's not the way I vote. I'm just saying that. Thank you.
Can I comment? Sorry, I don't.
Please, I can't see anything here from people wishing to.
I know. It's difficult to have slide presentations and all the participants. It's Councillor Patty Cuddle. Thank you. Yeah. So I just want to say that I actually kind of like this. I like the contrast between the modern and the old because it really sets the heritage building apart, as it's it makes it stand out against the modern building. And when I look at that building, I see that some elements have been carried over in what I think is a very tasteful way, such as the bands above the windows there, the triangle piece at the top matching the triangle piece on the main building, the recess of the eave around the whole that frames the entire building there, that if you can see the little recess between the outer edge and where the windows are, and the foundation piece as well. So I get that it is modern, but I do think it's respectful in its height and its form, and that it accentuates the heritage building, I think, in a nice way. I think if you were to carry over like the rotunda, the round piece there to this one, it would diminish the quality of the existing building. So I feel like it doesn't diminish the quality of the existing building. It doesn't mimic it to the point where it's pretending to be something it's not, and that it's in its simplicity. It elevates its partner there.
Thank you, Councillor. That's very helpful in helping us see it from a slightly different perspective. Pardon the pun.
It's Councillor Stoddard. I don't know if you can see my hand or not. I actually had the opposite opinion of Councillor Cuddle. I think there's a big contrast, and it kind of takes away from the older building. I know, as you were saying, Lois, there's no space for any kind of, there's no space for any green space. There's no space for any kind of garden. I'm not even sure where the entrance way is for this building. It must be in the back, is it?
No.
Sorry.
You, Madam Chair, there is there is right here. This is, there's a front gate. If you can see this, there's
Yes.
a fence and then there's a gate. And there's, I believe there's somewhere around 20 feet between the two buildings. And there is a walkway that will be, they're going to have some shrubs and grass. And as you come in between the two buildings, when you turn right, that's the entrance to the addition, would be on to the right, halfway down.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, I feel that it's a modern building, but you know, I mean, that's not to say that I will vote that way, but I just think that if they had to put a couple of characteristics of the heritage property in there, you know, it might have just set it off a little bit and made it a little bit more cozy, but you know, that's just my opinion. But other than that, you know, I do think the addition is a lot more modern. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Something which might unify it, that bottom row, that is a window wall because there are basement suites in the addition. So it's understandable that there may not be heavy vegetation there, but if you extended the black wrought iron fence to run along the front of the addition to the property line, that might link it in with the heritage property, but set it off at the same time and make it a little more pleasing. And with the right kind of vegetation along that window wall, it might not be obtrusive for the residents. That's just a thought.
We can definitely mention that to them, Madam Chair. I do believe that there are supposed to be shrubs in the front, and I think they're just not coming up in the rendition. If you look, I think there's, they're kind of hard to see, but there's 4 green circles. I think they represent shrubs that are to be placed in front of the building.
Yes. Yes.
Right. And I do believe that the site plan also indicates.
Chair, I'm just going to interrupt really quickly. I apologize. I've been having some technical difficulties on my end. Paul, I'm wondering if you can share the schedules, specifically the front elevation for the committee.
Yes, I will. I'll get them up here.
And just to speak to Councillor Stoddard's point very quickly. So we did work through several iterations of this design with the applicant based on some advice from staff. So originally it was a bit more modern and contrasting with the existing building. And we did work with the applicant to add a little bit more articulation on the front. If you see the new addition as viewed directly from the front, that articulation, the varied window sizes give the appearance of a bay window, but is still abstract enough so that it meets the requirements for contrasting and distinct new development. Also the roof line, the colors that were chosen, the materials that were chosen, and the string courses partway up the wall were all attempts at being complementary to the existing building's design.
My apologies, the program is not.
You can just make that full screen, Paul.
I'm having a problem here.
We look forward to being able to meet again in person.
There we go.
There you are, Paul.
And if the members of the committee have access to the staff report, the schedules within the draft development agreement also contain the elevation drawings, which you can refer to.
This is Marisha. Sorry, I've got my hand up. I'm just going to jump in, Lois. I would have to agree with Councillor Cuttle on this one. I think if I was walking down the street and I saw these two houses, I could recognize that they were related and recognize the nature of how the heritage was integrated within it. And it's the triangular windows and the banding that really shows some similarities to it, but I also like how it is modern, and there's not an attempt to be something completely similar. It's actually just, it's almost a modern interpretation of what the house was, or what the house would be today. And I think that's kind of in fitting with the purpose of what the bylaws are attempting to do in the heritage incentives. This house, I believe, I was looking at it again last night, and I said, this one is similar to the one that Lois highlighted on the corner of Inglis and Tower, with the Italianate, how they incorporated all of the different aspects within it.
Thank you, Marisha. Are there other questions or comments?
Madam Chair, this is Sandra. I was wondering about the concern that was expressed about parking. Is this being addressed in any way?
Well, there is parking actually across the street that's available to purchase. And again, there is parking up the street. As I said, the developer does have own a building which does have an abundance of parking in it. So there is parking in the area as well as on-street parking.
I believe, committee, that this was also a concern with the Italianate development on Inglis Street. And we eventually conceded that it was being built for university and professional people working, studying in the area, and that the provisions for bike parking were probably sufficient. I was just a little interested in seeing it crop up again here, not very far away. But I do agree with Paul's comment that there's a lot of off-street parking available informally in the area on other properties on a rental basis.
Thank you.
Anyone else, or shall we ask for the recommendation to be put? And if so, could someone read it for us, please? Because I don't think I can. Well, I will put it then. I'll read it.
We should ask, actually, if for the sake of the minutes, that another committee member read the
okay.
The motion.
Could we have a volunteer, please?
I'll read it.
Thank you, Councillor Stoddard.
Okay, so we're looking at 9.1.2, case 23186, the development agreement to allow a multi-unit residential addition to the multi-registered heritage property at 1029 South Park Street, Halifax. The motion that the Heritage Advisory Committee recommend to Halifax and West Committee Council, 1, to give notice of motion to consider the proposed development agreement as set out in attachment A of the May 14th, 2021 report, to allow a 2.5-story multi-unit residential addition to an existing heritage building located at 1029 South Park Street and schedule a public hearing. 2, approve the proposed development agreement, which shall be substantially of the same form as set out in attachment A. And 3, require the development agreement to be signed by the property owner within 240 days or any extension thereof granted by council on request of the property owner from the date of the final approval of council and any other bodies as necessary, including applicable appeal periods, whichever is later. Otherwise, this approval will be null and void, and obligations arising hereunder shall be at an end. Sorry, I so move.
Thank you, Counselor. We have a seconder for that.
I would second that, Sandra.
Thank you. All those in favor, again, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Contrary minded.
Nay.
Thank you. I believe the motion is carried. Okay, and I think we can now, I will step back and the chair will resume.
Everybody. Okay, so thank you, Lois, for that. I believe we're going to move on to item 9.1.3 now, case H00486, request to include 5943 Spring Garden Road, Halifax, 1538 and 1540 Carlton Street, Halifax, in the registry of heritage properties for the Halifax Regional Municipality. So this is going to be similar to one that we did last month, where we're evaluating, I believe. So I'll let staff take over and give us a little bit more information on these applications.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Jesse Morton, planner with the HRM Heritage team. Just waiting for Simon to give me sharing capabilities there, then we'll get started.
Yep, you should be receive those permissions.
Okay, just 1 second here. Okay, so can everybody see the title screen there?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
I can see it.
Yes.
Okay, great. So again, thank you, Madam Chair, for the introduction. So this is Heritage Case 486, which is the registration for 5943 Spring Garden Road in downtown Halifax. So just before jumping into the evaluation of this property, staff did think it's important to highlight some of the background information that was included in the staff report in the event that folks had questions or weren't able to read it entirely. So this application stems from an HAC recommendation back in October 2019. So the committee recommended that 3 properties near the Carlton and Spring Garden Road intersection be considered for registration. So the rationale behind this was that these Victorian properties were not included in the early Victorian streetscape, which is located on the southern portion of Carlton Street, shown here in the image in blue. But they believe that they were important properties that still warranted consideration. So the HAC recommendation noted 3 properties, these being 1538 Carlton, 1540 Carlton, and 5925 Spring Garden Road. Staff would just like to clarify that 59 Spring Garden Road is not an active civic address, so that was just simply a typo. So the only Spring Garden Road address that meets the description in HAC's recommendation is again 5943, which we'll be discussing. So after receiving that recommendation, Regional Council directed staff to in fact explore the potential registration of these properties. So in addition to some of the obvious COVID-related challenges that we experienced last year, there were several other important things that we should note. So in early 2020, our team had over double digits heritage registration applications in, which is the most we've had in quite some time, likely the past decade. At that point in time, we didn't have internal research capacities. Luckily, we have hired Elizabeth, who you folks I think met last meeting, which has been a great help moving forward this year. But last year, we really relied on contracted researchers to get the research done. So between this unusually high number of registrations and other exercises like the Heritage Conservation District research and the MAP 6 exercise, we really tapped out our qualified researcher capabilities. Another issue that we ran into is that a demolition permit was actually issued for one of these properties in 2018. So that was on the books when HAC made the recommendation. And shortly after, a demolition application was approved for the other Carlton Street property. So unfortunately, both of these two properties were demolished before the research and the staff reports could be prepared. So you'll notice in the recommendation here, staff are saying that we should not consider registration of these two properties anymore as they are vacant. And again, the heritage value was tied to the buildings, and that we will move forward with the evaluation of 5943 Spring Garden Road at this time. So moving on to that subject property, the existing property is located on the northwest portion of Carlton and Spring Garden Road intersection. It contains this building pictured here, a 2.5-story wooden structure designed in the Queen Anne style. It is actually abuts a registered property known as the William Barnstead House, which you can also see here in the image. And it is also located directly north of the early Victorian streetscape, which is a registered streetscape. And of course, because this is a third-party application, staff did notify the current property owner that we were processing this. We have yet to hear back from that individual. If this application does move forward to a heritage hearing, we will be contacting them again and inviting them to participate. But at this point in time, we have not had correspondence with that party or individual. So just a reminder of the scoring criteria. So the property will be scored in accordance with these 6 criteria. Each criteria has a maximum score for a total value of 100 points. If the total score equals 50 or more points, the HAC will move forward with a positive recommendation to Regional Council. So looking at the property's age, the subject property and the surrounding area were once part of the original Halifax Common. So in 1888, a portion of the Commons lands were actually converted into 51 lots on either side of Spring Garden Road. Charles Barnstead purchased 2 of these lots, pictured here on the left, in 1840. By 1878, he had constructed a tannery and several accessory structures on the property. Looking at the fire insurance map on the right, you'll see that at that time, these structures were gone. The lot was subdivided. And Charles's son, William, actually constructed the registered property that exists now. So subsequently in 1907, Stephen Heisler purchased this property, which was believed to be vacant at the time. And the McAlpine City Directory from 1907 and 1908 suggests he did live there shortly after. So this research indicates that the dwelling was constructed circa 1907, and as such, staff recommend a score of 9 points. So I believe we'll do the usual procedure here. We'll pause after each criteria, and then the HAC can assign a score.
Thanks, Jesse. I think that this is typically the most straightforward one, wherein there's a specific point assignment for each of the eras that are available here. So I think that with the committee's permission, we should just carry on here and assign 9 points to this item. Anybody object? Okay, great. We'll keep moving then.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. So the next criteria is either architectural or historical importance. Staff are recommending that it be scored in accordance with its architectural importance. So the existing dwelling, which now contains residential or commercial uses rather, is designed in the Queen Anne Revival style, which was most popular in Nova Scotia between 1880 and 1915. So this architectural style is a Victorian era architectural style where buildings really focused on being ornate and vibrant and having exuberant detailing. So the dwelling very much embodies Victorian principles, even though it was constructed during the Edwardian era, where buildings tended to be a bit more simplistic in terms of their detailing. So this is a mid to late but highly representative example of the Queen Anne Revival style. It really embodies its defining features such as asymmetry, dynamic roof shapes, bay windows, corner towers, decorative detailing. So with this consideration in mind, staff are recommending us for a 11 to 15 for architectural importance.
Okay, as we do, I'm going to open that up to the floor. Staff are recommending between 11 and 15 for this home. Anybody want to chime in?
I would think at least 15.
Sure, at least 15. So you would go above what staff's recommendation would be?
Yes, I would.
Sure. Okay. Do you want to expand on why?
I would just bump it up to 16.
Okay, sure. Because you feel that it's more highly important or highly
Yeah, I think
for
it's
representative of
really
the area?
quite. I think it's unique. I think it's quite unique. There's not another house in Halifax like that, is there?
We'll get to that shortly. There is one other that that actually looks quite a bit like that.
I think the
But
one
there
next
aren't
door,
many that
next
have
door
this
is not
exact-
dissimilar either, is it?
At least to my knowledge. Anyway,
Sure.
that's my.
No, thank you, Sandra. I appreciate it. Cassandra?
Is there anything missing from the requirements that would prevent this from getting a 15 or even more? Is there any gap?
Right, so through you, Madam Chair. So I guess the rationale for staff's suggestion here is that this was a mid to late example of the Queen Anne style. It was built closer towards the period where they stopped building Queen Anne's. So if you factor that in with the uniqueness, staff landed at a score suggestion of 11 to 15 points. But if the HAC disagrees with that recommendation, that is something that you're able to do, and you can give it more or fewer points if you desire.
Madam Chair, perhaps I'm slightly prejudiced for that house because I actually lived in that house a few months after I graduated.
That's understandable. Cassandra, does that help to answer your question or maybe lean you in any direction?
I'm good. I know where I sit on it. Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else have any other suggestions? We've got a 15 or a 16 on the table right now. Jennifer?
I'm very comfortable with a 15. I do agree that it is fairly unique in Halifax. I think the gold house is similar to it, but yeah, I'm very comfortable with a 15. But I do appreciate staff's recommendations and understand their reasoning for keeping it in that category.
Great.
Yeah, I'm good with a 15 too, Jenny.
Thanks, Councillor Tuttle. Anybody, Lois? I see your hand.
I'm fine with a 15 as well.
It sounds like we're mostly leaning towards a 15 here. Do we want to do a vote for if you agree with the 15, could you chime in, turn off your microphone and say aye, please?
Aye.
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 Okay, anybody want to object to that? Okay, it sounds like a 15 is what we're going to go with here. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, moving on to number 3, we'll keep this one fairly short. So our research didn't uncover any information on an architect or builder, and as such, we're recommending a score of 0 for significance.
Okay, I know we struggled with this last time that we did some evaluations, and we know that this is one of the, challenging things about the system that we use is that if we can't find the architect or the builder, then unfortunately we can't rank the architect or the builder. I would posit that we'd have to go with staff's recommendation here, considering we don't know the identity of the builder. Does anybody have any thoughts or feelings on this? No? Okay. Jennifer, your hand is up. Is that still left over from last time?
I'm sorry, that was up from last time, but
Okay.
I do agree with you though.
Okay, no problem. I just wanted to make sure. Okay, great. Thank you. I think we'll go with a 0 here then.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So moving on to the two-part criteria for architectural merit, starting with construction type. So we know that this is a wood frame construction that sits on a masonry foundation. However, we are unsure of the exact framing technique. Again, we haven't heard back from the property owner, and it's very difficult for staff to determine this under the best of circumstances. So we do note, however, that the exterior construction and detailing would have taken a skilled builder to construct. So factoring this into consideration, we would recommend a score between 1 and 6 points for construction type.
Okay, I'll open that up to the floor. Does anybody have any thoughts? We're in a kind of wide range here, so if we're feeling like it's a little bit more rare or early, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think given that, you know, we just scored a 0 on the builder, but we've just recognized that it would take a very skilled builder to build this house. And, you know, if you look at how well it's held up over time, you know, you can tell it's a well-built house. So, you know, I'm leaning toward scoring higher here than lower. I would go with the 4 to 6, say 5.
Okay, Patty, thank you. Anybody else want to chime in on a 5?
I can definitely support a 5, and I agree with Patty for all the reasons that she stated.
I do too.
Great. Okay, I'm going to suggest a 5 here then. Does anybody want to suggest something different? No? Okay, sounds like we're going to go with a 5 here. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the style component of architectural merit. Again, we'll just reiterate that we feel this is a good example of the Queen Anne Revival style. It's really a good archetype of the style. You can see a lot of its trademark features here, including the irregular building plan, intricate detailing, etc. When looking specifically at this property and some of its unique defining elements, there's several here that are noteworthy. It has a truncated hip roof, has wood siding with a string course that you can kind of see there between the first and second stories and the darker paint color. There's several 2-story bay windows. There's the front corner tower with the conical roof. Then on the rear, there's a projecting bay with a similar cone-shaped roof at the back. There's also a pedimented gable there on the eastern elevation right in the middle of that image. And just moving a bit closer, you can see the decorative entryway with the transom window and an oval window here on the right with keystone. So everything considered, there are some very unique style listings on this property. So staff would recommend a score between 7 and 10 points.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jesse. I would start off to say I absolutely agree. There's some really interesting detailing here. Anybody want to throw a number out here?
I would definitely say in the higher range, maybe 9 or 10. It is a beautiful building.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Councillor Stoddart has posited a 9 or a 10. Anybody want to chime in?
I would agree with 10.
10, sure.
Yeah, I would support 10 as well.
I would as well. Me as well.
Okay.
I would too.
Great, full points for architectural merit style. That's great, everybody. Okay, so we're going to move on with a 10 unless anybody has any objections. Great.
Okay, great. So moving on to architectural integrity, the property, which you can see here on the left, this is the oldest picture I think that we could track down. It has a high degree of architectural integrity. Looking at the old mapping, the original footprint is still intact, as are many of the original architectural features. We do know that the original window fenestration is still in place, though a lot of the original windows have been replaced with a single pane window, whereas they would have had at least one frames in the past. There's also an accessibility ramp on the rear of the property, which doesn't have much bearing on its architectural integrity. One of the HAC members asked about uniqueness of the property. So this the image on the right here is actually the Federal Heritage Building. It's located at 2639 Lorne Drive. So if you're driving down North Street towards the bridge, right across from the bus stop, if folks are familiar with the area, if you take a look to the left, you can kind of see a portion of this is behind a large fence now, but you can see in these two images that both buildings use a very similar design. It's quite striking, the similarities between the two. You will notice that the Federal Heritage property has more intricate detailing. You can see that it has a cupola on the roof. There's some detailing on the pediment gable bay there as well. So staff are unable to determine if these were mirror images of each other, or the Spring Garden Road was just a very similar but less ornate version. We can't really confirm either of those details, but regardless, staff are recommending a strong score of 6 to 10 points in terms of architectural integrity.
Okay, thanks, Jesse. Anybody want to chime in here?
I would go with at least a 10 on this one. It's largely the same, and I don't think adding an accessibility ramp should be distracting from the architectural integrity. That's as a living building, that would be something you would add to it anyways.
Thanks, Marisha. That makes sense. Lois, your hand is up there.
I would suggest perhaps an 11 because it's an outstanding example. Very little has changed. And I agree, the accessibility ramp is a necessity these days for professional use of the structure. I'd suggest an 11.
Okay, so largely unchanged rather than modest changes.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, fair enough. Anybody else want to chime in on a 10 or 11 or anything else?
This is Marisha. I agree with Lois. I've changed my mind.
Okay, well, we've got an 11 on the table.
We're allowed to do that.
This is Luke, and I agree with Lois as well. I think any changes that are reversible, such as that accessibility ramp, don't really have an impact on its integrity. So I'd support the 11.
Okay, I'll put an 11 on the floor. Does anybody want to disagree? Okay, great. We're going to go with an 11 for this one.
Okay, and last but not least, we have relationship to the surrounding area. So this is one of the last remaining private residences on the Halifax Common lots along Spring Garden Road. It actually does abut another Halifax Common residence, as discussed, the William Barnstead House at 5945, I believe, Spring Garden Road. So it's quite unique and rare that there are two of those abutting each other. The Queen Anne building also has very strong historical, physical, and visual connections to the early and Victorian streetscape, which is located on the southern portion of Carleton. A lot of the buildings here were designed in a similar era and have a similar architectural style and detailing. So with these considerations in mind, staff would recommend a score of 6 to 10 points.
Okay, thanks, Jesse. Lois, your hand is up here. Did you want to chime in, or was that from before?
That's left over.
Oh,
but
no
I will
problem.
say I would go for a 10.
Sure. Great, thanks. Luke?
Yeah, I would agree with Lois there. I think it's unquestionably a 10, given its relationship to the Victorian streetscape and its kind of rarity on along Spring Garden Road. I think, yeah, absolutely a 10.
We've got a 10 on the table. Does anybody disagree with a 10? Okay, we're going to go with a 10 for the relationship to surrounding area.
Okay, so in conclusion, this is the recommendation that is outlined in the staff report. Again, first and foremost, we're recommending that the 2 Carlton Street properties, which are now vacant, not be considered as registered heritage properties. And then second, should the 5943 Spring Garden Road score 50 or more points, which I believe it did, the HAC would recommend that Regional Council set a date for the heritage hearing and approve the request to add the property to the Registry of Heritage Property for HRM. So if anyone has any questions or comments about either the registration of the Spring Garden property or the other 2 Carlton properties, feel free to let me know. Thank you.
Jesse, can you put that motion back on the screen?
Sure.
Please, thank you.
Okay, great. So if anybody has any further questions.
Question?
Sure, go ahead, Councillor Stoddard.
I'm just wondering, out of 100, what the final total for this building was, please.
Through 3 to the committee, the property scored a total of 60 points in this matter,
Okay.
which is above the 50 required.
Okay, I was writing them down, but then I got distracted. Thank you.
No problem, thanks. Luke, your hand is up. Do you have any additional questions?
I think that's left over from before.
Not a problem. Okay, without any further questions, if I could ask that somebody put the motion on the floor and we can take a vote.
I can go. This is Marisha for the record. I move that the Heritage Advisory Committee recommend that Regional Council deny the request to include 1538 and 1540 Carlton Street, Halifax in the Registry of Heritage Property for the Halifax Regional Municipality as the dwellings have been demolished. 2, should 5943 Spring Garden Road, Halifax score 50 or more points on evaluation as a heritage property under the HRM Heritage Property Program, the Heritage Advisory Committee recommends that Regional Council will 1, set a date for a heritage hearing to consider the inclusion of the subject property in the Registry of Heritage Property for the Halifax Regional Municipality, and 2, approve the request to include 5943 Spring Garden Road, Halifax in the Registry of Heritage Property for the Halifax Regional Municipality as shown on map 1 as a municipal heritage property under the Heritage Property Act.
Okay, all those in favor, please turn off your microphones and say yes or aye.
Aye. I'll second the motion if you need that.
Oh, sorry. Yes, please.
It's Cassandra. I'll second the motion.
Thanks, Cassandra.
You're welcome.
Okay, now let's try that again. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Contrary minded? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Jesse, for the presentation and everybody for participating. Okay, now we are going to go back in time to item 9.1.1, which is the draft regional center secondary municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw. I believe we're going to start off with a presentation from staff, and then we're going to have some time, ample time for discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Should I go ahead and jump into the presentation?
Yes, please go right ahead.
Okay, I'll do. Sorry, excuse me, I'm gonna clean up my. Apologies, I seem to be freezing here. Oh, here we go. Try this again. Sorry.
No problem. Are you having trouble turning your screen on? Because I know that was happening with Paul earlier. Oh, no, we're okay. Okay, great.
Here we go.
Okay.
It's just I think what happened is I had two PDFs open and one was covering the other, and I was having trouble finding the right one, but I sorted it out. Okay, sorry, apologies for the delay. Thank you, Chair and committee members. Very pleased to be here to be talking about Central Plan Package B and providing an overview of the planning process. It's been a long journey, and as some of you this might be an introduction, and others may have been involved for quite some time. But I'm very much looking forward to talking about the heritage items and answering questions and hearing the feedback from community members. And I'll just note, without going into too much detail, I'll just acknowledge all the work from previous staff and the team involved, not just the Central Plan team, but all of P&D and many different divisions and departments of the municipality have really contributed to this project, including, of course, the heritage team that are here with us today. So I'm going to provide hopefully a thorough enough overview to give you a sense of what of the journey that the Package B has been on, and what the Central Plan all entails, but really be focusing on the heritage items. Of course, we're at the Heritage Advisory Committee, so I'll be going over the whole package, but really focusing on those heritage items. And I expect the presentation to take about 15-20 minutes and provide lots of time for questions, comments. So what I'll be going over is the background, the context, and the planning process. Going over Package A, which is the first phase of the Central Plan process, focusing on Package B and the key heritage items, touching on the remaining committee and council review process, and of course the recommendations. So, just to set the stage in terms of context, and this might be some community members might be familiar with this, but the Central Plan is really part of a larger initiative called the Secondary Plan and Bylaw Simplification Program. For a variety of reasons, the planning context and HRAM, the framework, that the planning documents at the neighborhood, at the community and neighborhood scale is quite complex. Many plans date back to the 80s and 90s. And there's some inconsistencies, and duplication between the various plans, different definitions of height and so on. So there is an ongoing work program to review and consolidate these plans, with the first phase being the Central Plan, where we're seeing a lot of the growth pressures and also where some of the oldest plans are in place. And it's no surprise we're starting with the regional center, because this is, while it's a small portion of the land area, it's actually a big part of the municipality, about 25% of the population. And I'm sure, as this committee knows, it's also the political and kind of economic, cultural center of the municipality. This is where a lot of facilities, cultural facilities, a lot of the heritage is located in this valley. Of course, this is where the cities of Dartmouth and Halifax were first founded. And it's an area targeted for significant growth, but under the regional plan and the integrated mobility plan, which we have been experienced over the last few years, just by seeing all the different constraints. And I'm sure this project that this committee has been reviewing over the last few years. To briefly touch on the Central Plan process, and now the work on the Central Plan actually dates back more than a decade, but the Central Plan process, as we know, it really started off in September of 2015 with a number of background studies in community engagements, like a broad-based vision exercise to understand what the public and stakeholders wanted to see, that their vision for the future of the regional center. From there, we developed a guiding policy framework document, which is known as the Purple document, which continues to guide the Package B process today, and where council gave direction to use that document for the basis of preparing detailed planning documents. From there, the Central Plan process was split in two because the geography was just so large and covered so many topics. So Package A focused on the high growth areas, and it was approved by council in September 2019. So it's in place today and guiding current projects. And what we're focused on today is Package B, which is covering all the remaining areas of the regional center, and resulting in one comprehensive plan. So it's not that there's going to be a Package A and a Package B plan. Package B is really adding to Package A to cover the entire regional center. I just quickly mentioned that, and I'll be focusing on our Package B process, but some of the earlier processes in the Central Plan and broad-based visioning process reached out and got lots of great feedback from various stakeholders in the public, and it continues to be a relevant resource for discussions going forward. as for package B engagement, like many other municipal projects or projects, around the world, was very much impacted by the COVID-19 state of emergency, by the pandemic. Just before the start of the pandemic, we were able to hold 10 pop-ups and 12 stakeholder sessions, including interesting one on heritage preservations. However, the 8 public meetings that were planned had to be canceled, along with many other gatherings. Since then, when working with the Community Design Advisory Committee, we've been able to pivot to more of a virtual format and try to use as many variety engagement tools as possible, including social media and correspondence, various online surveys, virtual meetings like we're holding today, and during the last part of the engagement process, focusing on established residential, which is the low density areas, and also the St. Patrick Alexander site located in Halifax, North End Halifax. And as I mentioned in the staff report, this all was compiled into what we call What We Heard report, which explained the engagement process, the feedback received, key themes, and some of the key themes and the detailed survey summaries. Outlined the detailed feedback received on the St. Patrick Alexander site, including there's some feedback related to heritage preservation regarding that site. Of course, a lot of correspondence and site-specific requests as well. Okay, that's enough for background. It's like I said, it's been a long journey and a lot of work to get to where we are. And I'm briefly going to touch on the package A, what's already been approved, and focusing on the heritage components and most importantly, the proposed updates and part of the current package. Okay, well, firstly, and most importantly, I guess most plans need to be based on some goals, or in this case, core concepts. For the center plan area, this includes complete communities, human scale design, pedestrian first, and strategic growth. Sorry, I have some recent problems saying that word. And it included in package A were a number of these high growth areas that we refer to as designations. So some of this might be familiar to committee members, but included downtown Dartmouth, where of course a variety of uses and growth is intended. Centers, places like Queenquill Road and Wise Road, where like downtowns, a variety of mixed use and taller buildings are encouraged to locate. Corridors, which is applied to major transportation routes, which support more of a mid-rise and mixed-use built form. Higher order residential, which is the more apartment building and more residential focus, and then also future growth nodes, which are areas targeted for master-aid neighborhood planning, places like Shannon Park and some of the existing shopping malls that can accommodate a significant amount of residential growth in the years ahead. Package A also established a number of policy areas, building on the strength of the downtown plans, a strong urban design focus about the street walls and building design and a variety of architectural and site design controls. A section on cultural heritage, which I'll touch on in a bit more detail, and also housing, economic development, mobility, environment, and implementation policies. So the different tools for permitting and development agreements that this committee might be familiar with. So, being at the Heritage Advisory Committee, I'll focus on the cultural and heritage components of the package A. And this is where package A established policies and identified landscapes of cultural significance. So these are landscapes that have some cultural values to it, whether it's views or reflecting on past patterns, and it's intended to guide, is guiding the current plan and also intended to guide future changes to the plan. So it's an ongoing consideration. The package A set out reduced heights and floor area ratios, so amount of density for registered heritage properties and proposed heritage conservation districts. And this is intended to kind of encourage development that for larger scale projects to go through a development agreement process. As this committee I think is already experiencing, there is also a development agreement policy option for registered heritage properties where if a property is registered, they can seek additional flexibility or development rights to help preserve the heritage features. Through Package A, it also included heritage conservation in the incentive and bonus zoning requirements, as well as affordable cultural and community indoor spaces. So a significant another and important incentives for encouraging the preservation of heritage resources. And I'll also note that there's heritage design requirements for heritage buildings and abutting properties. So Package B is focused on the other remaining areas of the regional center, but is proposing a number of refinements or updates to the Package A policies and regulations, largely based on experience. We have been administering it for a year and a half, and also feedback from stakeholders in the public who have also had experience with the plan. Some of the items related to heritage is a streamlined use of the site plan approval tool, which isn't necessarily focused on heritage preservation, but we have an overall approach to focus on using the site plan tool for exceptions to the rule instead of using it for rules that are already quite black and white to administer. The refinement of there's also some refinement of the built form building design requirements for registered heritage properties, and this is in relation to about balancing the controls that are in the land use bylaw and those that are administered through the Heritage Property Act. That actually, if you have too much detail in the land use bylaw, it can conflict with the heritage control. So you might notice some refinement and a reduction of some of those in the land use bylaw, given that it's actually better covered off under the Heritage Property Act controls. There's some refinement of the Heritage Property Development Agreement policies based on experience. Notably some clarification that the additional development rights that the property owner can seek need to be proportional to the investments in the heritage preservation. There is a new site-specific development agreement policy proposed for the St. Patrick Alexandra site, and this is in response to some council direction to explore the development of that site. And one of the key criteria of the development agreement policy is that some additional flexibility for building heights and development is permitted, provided the Andrew Cobb School facade building is the facade of the building is maintained, as well as consideration given to the surrounding heritage context. Also note that the Spring Garden Road and Robert Street Lands Development Agreement, which was approved just prior to Package A, is proposed to be brought forward under Package B into the Center Plan framework. That development agreement policy is already in place and includes a lot of strong controls related to heritage preservation, and it's being brought forward in Package B to address to clarify some challenges with the wording of the policy, and also extend the project timeline, because it is quite a large and complex project. There's also some minor updates proposed to the bonus zoning provisions to support heritage conservation within heritage conservation districts. The existing wording focuses on heritage property, and this is a bit of an expansion to provide a bit more flexibility to use money in lieu funds or on-site preservations for heritage conservation districts as well. Okay, that's Package A, and I'll move on to Package B, and again I'll focus on the heritage components and just briefly touch on the other parts of the plan, just to provide some context for committee members. An important designation is the Parks and Community Facilities designation. This is, of course, applied to parks and open spaces and facilities in a park-like setting. I can't think of many kind of heritage-related components other than to note that some of these parks are also identified as important landscapes of cultural significance. The downtown designation is expanded to include downtown Halifax. So as part of the bylaw simplification, the downtown Halifax plan is being brought into the Central Plan framework. And of note here is that the Central Plan will actually not apply to the Barrington Street and Old South Suburbs Heritage Conservation District. So the existing downtown Halifax plan will continue to apply to those areas until the downtown Halifax Heritage Conservation District work is completed and the whole area is able to be brought into the Central Plan framework. So those areas remain untouched under the Halifax plan. So it's a bit of a hole in the plan for the next number of months. The established residential designation is, probably the part of the Package B process that is generating the most feedback and interest, because it covers such a a broad area of the regional center. About a third of the regional center would be a kind of a low density residential in nature. And it's a designation applied to all the low density areas and establishes 4 different zones, and in ER1, which has got a 1-unit zone plus accessory and backyard suites, established residential 2, which is 2 units plus accessory and backyard suites, and established residential 3, which is a 3-unit plus accessory suites and townhouses, which is applied along transit corridors, and also a cluster housing zone. And of note from my Heritage perspective is the inclusion of 5 precincts and 11 special areas, which recognize the different parts of the municipality were developed at different stages and phases and have their own characters. And doesn't go as far as the Heritage Conservation District, but does include controls related to things like lot coverage and setback to support the maintenance of the character of those neighborhoods. The established residential designation includes a number of heritage preservation components that I'll touch on. One is of significance is the Schmidtville HCDs incorporated under the Heritage Conservation District zone and established as a designation. So all those very specific kind of tailored controls for the Schmidtville HCD are carried forward into the central plan framework. So updates are really limited to formatting versus anything substantive. There's also 3 new proposed heritage conservation districts in these low density areas, and this is in response to a council motion from a number of months ago to look at heritage conservation districts in the south end of Halifax, and this includes Oakland Road, Fort Massey, and Yonge Avenue. Under package B, the maximum height in all registered heritage properties is proposed to be 8 meters, and this is to kind of discourage kind of redevelopment without outside of any development agreement or other process. The ER1 zone is applied over the proposed HCDs and the ER designation. So the ER1 being a lowest density zone is applied to these zones to again discourage premature redevelopment of these sites before those HCD processes, Heritage Conservation District processes, can get ahead of it and establish some design controls. And recognizing that could cause some challenges for existing properties, the Hydrostone area, for example, there's quite a bit of flexibility for non-conforming residential uses, so that low density uses can continue to expand or could be rebuilt if destroyed by fire or otherwise. The institutional employment designation is an important part of package B, given the many institutional lands in the regional center, the hospitals, Department of National Defense, university and colleges. And of note from a heritage perspective is a policy and regulation about the adapted reuse of certain landmark buildings. So in the proposed land use bylaw, a number of landmark buildings which aren't registered heritage properties, but do contribute to the character of communities, places of worship and community centers, where some special permission is provided to enable the reuse of these buildings, internal conversion of them for residential and limited commercial uses as a right, with provided the buildings are largely maintained. And that's intended to encourage their preservation should the use of those buildings no longer be feasible. Quickly touch on the employment designation. The harbor related industrial is an important part of Halifax, as well as Woodside Industrial Park, which is proposed to be zone light industrial. And I can't think of many kind of cultural and heritage related components of this designation. And the last designation that's added through package B is a water access designation, and it's applied to pre-Confederation water lots that the committee members may not be aware. They can be infilled if approval is given by the federal government on the Northwest Arm or by the provincial government on Lake Banook and Lake Micmac. Municipality can't control whether or not the land is infilled, but we can control how the land is used after it is infilled. So this is why there is a special zone created for it, which generally limits development to park and recreation type uses. Again, it's part of environmental protection, but also the preservation of the heritage of the existing shoreline. In terms of the review and adoption process, we're just starting the committee review process. We were at Community Design Advisory Committee last week, and one of the community councils And we, over the next month and number of weeks into the middle of July, we expect to go through the 7 different committees noted on the screen, with all the recommendations being combined for regional council for discussion at committee whole. And at this point, are continuing to target a public hearing for September 21, kind of remains a realistic target date. Just to touch on some next steps in terms of culture and heritages, as I'm sure this committee is familiar with, one of the important next step is the development of the Downtown Halifax Heritage Conservation District, which will combine the Barrington Street and Old South Strasbourg with a proposed capital area conservation district. This work, I understand, is ongoing, and I imagine this committee will be involved in the months ahead. And of course, another important component is with a number of proposed heritage conservation districts proposed. There is a work program to do the detailed research and consultations needed to develop the bylaws for the heritage conservation districts for the proposed ones identified in the central planning documents. And the recommendation is on the screen. I won't read it out. I won't read it out, but in short, it's the recommendation is to approve the regional center secondary planning strategy and regional center land use bylaw. Is to recommend the approval through the Community Planning Economic Development Standing Committee. And thank you. I hope that was a thorough but yet kind of brief enough overview to give you a sense of what the central plan package B entails, and of course, most importantly, the heritage components of the plan. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and pass it back to the chair, and we'll be happy to take any questions. And I just note that there are a number of different staff here from the center plan team, as I also may some of the questions also may be appropriate direct to the Aaron Murdahan as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Okay, I know that is a lot of information, everybody. Do we want to start with any clarifying background questions, anything like that, that anybody wants to ask about? We're all taking things in. Okay. Councillor Cuttle, go right ahead.
I just want to say, I think this is the fourth time, Ben, I've seen your presentation. And there is a lot to unpack there. So every time I see it, I'm getting a little bit more information. And so yeah, there is a lot there. And I just want to say thank you, Ben, for doing this and for going to all the committees and giving your presentation and giving this introduction. And for anyone who is trying to process it all, I would say it does take time, and there is a lot of engagement happening online. The first session on social policy on Friday, and just I think we just try to communicate this out to as many people as possible, that there's opportunities for people to engage in this plan and have some plan. Though I'm mixing that up with regional plan, aren't I? Not center plan package B. Oh my God, I got so many presentations going on in my head. Anyway, yes, center plan package B has engagement done. Yeah, anyway, thank you, Ben. I appreciate all the work you've put into this. And go see the regional plan review as well. That's equally as important.
I just had a question of clarification. Just probably for my own interest, but I noticed church steeples may be higher than the 8 millimeters, is it? I'm sorry, I forget what your M stands for.
Meters, yeah, millimeters would be quite short, yeah.
Okay. What do you do with churches that are heritage properties that go over and above? Is there an exception granted to them, or?
Yeah. Thanks for the question, and through the chair, I'll be happy to clarify. So the 8-meter height limit is applicable only to established residential areas. So we're talking about low density areas, and 8 meters reflects about a 2-story 2 stories in height. So for places of worship or churches or other kind of institutional uses that might have a registered property, in those cases, the heights are also lowered a little, but not, more like 11 or 14 meters, not all the way down to 8. And I think I briefly mentioned about the landmark building. So some important old churches may not be registered as heritage properties, but also have some incentives to be maintained through that landmark building provision, so that they can internally convert into another use if they keep the structure largely intact.
Yeah, I was curious because I saw a church with quite a high steeple in your picture there, and I just wondered how they managed to be designated heritage properties. Well, thank you, Ben. Appreciate your presentations, and everything was very informative. As Councillor Cuttle mentioned, every time we see these presentations, we get a little more out of it. So again, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the comment. I'll just briefly mention again through the chair that in terms of steeples, that we have certain height limits, but we also have exceptions. So things like spires are often exempt. I mean, it depends on the specific nature, but sometimes some of those architectural features like clock towers and things like that are exempt. So that's also an explanation of how those can be allowed to go higher.
Okay, Lois, your hand is up. You can go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I haven't been able to find some of the maps that I wanted to look at in the documents. So I'm wondering, is there a map yet that combines the HCDs, including the proposed ones, with the landscapes of cultural significance, and maybe throws in the residential special areas? Ben, can you speak to that, or have I missed something?
No, thanks for the comment and through the chair, man. Good, interesting question. I think it's not one of those things we keep in our minds, but it's generally shown on different maps. As you probably know, there's a map showing the general boundaries of the proposed HCDs, to be further refined through those studies, and those directly impact zoning. So that's why it's important to map those. The landscapes of cultural significance are identified and described in the plan, but they aren't specifically mapped, because really the nature of those are I guess fuzzy, right? And where the landscapes of cultural significance start and where it ends isn't set in stone and isn't intended to be clarified in the plan. It's more of a broad concept of the idea. So those some that are much easier to know where we're talking about things like the commons that of course have a core important recreation importance, but also in terms of the culture and heritage of the municipality as well. So those, I guess the short answer is to say the landscapes of cultural significance are intentionally not mapped, because they're more concepts to guide planning policies and future planning than it is about controlling the specific zoning. The other part of the thing part you asked about was the established residential special areas. And those are shown on a different map. There is some relationship between those and the proposed HCDs, and some of them are a bit of both, like the Young Avenue area. But I can't say we have a map prepared that overlays them both. I mean, there's a lot of maps, but yeah, there's a bit of overlay in between the two of them.
I think you may get community interest in those, the relationships between those three groupings, the special areas, the HCDs, and the landscapes, and particularly the commons. I couldn't see any mention of Goresbrook or any other remnants of the South Common. And I think some people will be concerned that a lot of those lands are free floating. That may be something that will be settled during future discussions. And I thank you very much, Ben. That helps me understand it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lois. Does anybody else have any questions for Ben? We can also get into comments, certainly, if anybody would like to make comments about what they've heard. I know it is a lot to take in, so I do believe we have the opportunity to have a conversation today and then have another meeting where we can discuss center plan. Sorry, the regional center land use or municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw. Center plan is much less of a mouthful, isn't it? So if anybody, you know, feels that they might need a little bit more time to sort that through, that's totally fine. If nobody has any questions right now, Ben, I might chime in with a couple. I'm just looking through. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the design, like conservation design requirements in a residential context, because I know that those are only, as far as I can tell, are only really applying to properties outside of the residential designation. And I'm wondering why that move was made and how those, you know, if a development were to take place in a residential context that was abutting a registered heritage property, those requirements wouldn't necessarily come into play. So I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, no, thanks for the question and an opportunity to clarify. Yeah, you're right to point out that the heritage design requirements generally applies to more higher density, like multi-unit buildings and mixed-use buildings than low-density areas. It's partially about the challenge of knowing what to preserve, and I mean this is a reason why the plan currently takes a bit of a two-pronged approach. So on one hand, you know, before work on identifying the key heritage items can be identified, we do establish these regional special areas, which is just a way of identifying geographies that have some common characteristics where the rules should be a bit different. And the focus of these special areas, like the West End area, North End, Halifax, is to recognize that the different lot patterns and kind of general built form context. So it intentionally stays away from the architectural features, partly because we just don't have enough information about that, but really you know, tries to control the scale of the buildings and just know if all the properties in the area, for example, have a large front yard, is to maintain that so that a new development area doesn't kind of interfere with that pattern. So that's on one hand, and there are, like I mentioned, 5 different precincts and 11 of those definite special areas. And I think the part that you're asking about is intended to be covered by identifying the proposed heritage conservation districts. Like Hydrostone is kind of a prime example of what you all recognize as heritage value there, but that and so the interim approach is to identify it as proposed, downzone it so that there's not incentives to redevelopment in the short term, but really give some time for the heritage conservation program to do the research and to potentially propose a heritage conservation district bylaw, which can really identify those key heritage items that should be preserved. So the Schmidt bill is probably is the one that's been approved, and it's generally a low density context. So it's a matter of kind of repeating that process, maybe not as complex as that area in all the other proposed HCDs, and there's a number of them proposed in the low density context. So, and I hope that answers your question.
No, that does. And I think maybe I'm interested, like I'm glad to hear that you've thought about that interim, because I know that that's going to be a bit of a period of time in order to get those HCDs completed. In that sense, as those do get completed, will those be adopted or like sucked into the RMPS? And so each one of those would be an amendment, like a municipal plan amendment?
Yes. Okay,
so then we're going
that's what we're expecting, because
because
it'd have to go from proposed to approved, and you might have to create a whole new zones and make all sorts of little adjustments to be able to be consistent with the heritage conservation design work. So a whole bunch of mini MPS amendment projects is what we're expecting.
Right. So do you have any idea of like a timeline for how long, one of those might take to bring in? Because I know that amendment process can be a little bit cumbersome.
Great question. I know there's ongoing work about streamlining that process, and I'm going to ask Aaron, as he turned his videos on, I'm going to ask Aaron or Pyle to comment on that.
Sure, thanks, Ben. And we brought this issue to Regional Council about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now, where we asked them to approve a process to prioritize future heritage conservation districts. So we developed a bit of a matrix to help us prioritize those as staff, and we're really aiming for about 24 to 36 months per HCD to get those approved, depending on staff resourcing. I would say in some cases those will be a little bit more simple. If they're in a residential area, for instance, there might be a lot less concern about comprehensive new development in those areas, much like Schmidtville has fairly simple zoning requirements. But if we're looking at an area like Old South Suburb in downtown Halifax, that can be much more complex when you're allowing multi-story buildings or mixed-use buildings. So I would say, 2 years a piece is what we're going to try and aim for. But there is the possibility, if we were to get additional staff resources, to tackle those either concurrently or at least more quickly.
Thank you, Aaron. I've monopolized for a few minutes. Does anybody have anything that they've thought of now? We did have some correspondence that we received on these items. The committee typically reads the packages in advance and will have received this correspondence in advance. I'm wondering if anybody has anything that they want to bring up from these. I know there just a really brief summary of them would be that there were some concerns about the Yonge Street special area, some concerns that new regulations that might jeopardize the Schmidtville HCD, and what was the third topic that I was going to? Oh, the fact that there are some areas or some patches of buildings that are non-registered and not recognized necessarily by special areas or anything that are likely to be lost in the coming years based on the development rights that have been put on them. So I'm not sure if anybody wants to speak to any of these things or ask any more questions about any of the topics that were brought up in the correspondence.
Madam Chair, this is Sandra. I had a question about Alan North's letter. He questioned the setback of the proposed new construction on Yonge Avenue being less than what traditionally was done. And I wondered why that was approved, because it seemed to me that the new construction is at odds with the historic homes that are there. And having the setback less just makes them all the more prominent.
Thanks for the comment. If it's appropriate, Madam Chair, I can comment on that. Absolutely.
Go ahead. Sorry, Ben.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's a good question. I think what the letter is pointing out is a proposed change to the minimum front yard setback. In this case, it's a couple of competing different priorities on this. So some comments from the committee would be welcome. But Yonge, I think, as this committee would know, that the Yonge Avenue area is one of the kind of defining features are the large homes and a large front yard. So those through the center plan package B, we are proposing to maintain that, but we also have competing urban design objectives about partly about the pedestrian experience and it just a desire to make efficient use of land. So the setbacks along Yonge Avenue are proposed to be reduced, not just for the vacant lots, but for the entire area. They're still much larger than anywhere else in the regional center, but they are a little bit less than currently. So it was, I guess, the refinement there was as an attempt at a kind of balancing those competing priorities. But having said that, I kind of also recognize that from a heritage perspective, that I can see the desire to maintain it as close to existing as possible.
Sandra, did that answer your question? And do we want to have any more discussion on that letter?
I can appreciate why that change was made, but I still think with the heritage context in mind that this is not an appropriate change to make. It's just my opinion.
Okay, thank you. So, and this, I'm not sure, this might be a question for Simon or somebody, but if HAC were to be interested in recommending any changes, those would then be taken to council as recommendations from HAC, I believe, but we need to go through the full, let's make a motion to this effect. Am I correct?
Yes, I believe that's correct. And those would first, I believe, because of the reporting process, come to Community Planning Economic Standing Committee.
Right. Okay, Lois, your hand is up. You can go ahead.
Thank you, Jenny. I wanted to agree with Sandra, and I got down into the weeds, which is not a place where we want to be at this point. But I was concerned about the residential special areas provision. And I guess this is for you again, Ben. I'm sorry. I was concerned, particularly with the Yonge Avenue, that, and I couldn't quite interpret what was being implied by the provisions, that those vacant lots might be susceptible to a development agreement, which would bring in some of these newer provisions, and I wouldn't call them loopholes, but flexibility for future development. I wonder if you could speak to that. I did not know how to interpret it.
Thanks for the question, and through the chair, I'd be happy to clarify and no worries. It is a complex document, and the way the land use bylaws is structured, especially that the Yonge Avenue, those provisions are kind of spread out through multiple sections. So I can recognize that it is a thread that might be a little bit harder to follow. So just to first of all, to clarify the intent of that policy is first of all, Package B is recognizing Yonge Avenue as being unique, and that's why it's identified as one of those established residential specialty areas with unique lot size and frontage requirements, and also allows for an internal conversion of existing homes to 3 units to help give incentives to maintain them, to maintain those buildings. It's also, the whole area is also identified as one of these proposed heritage conservation district where some more work is needed to really assess the heritage resources and potentially put in place a heritage conservation district bylaw to assess those. In the meantime, and I know it's been a bit of a topic of discussion over a few years, is the challenge of these vacant lots on Yonge Avenue that have already been subdivided into fairly small lots that currently can be developed as a single unit dwellings, and in their current configuration, it would mean I think 9 different single unit homes that are much narrower than the pattern along the street. And that has been a concern of I guess staff and residents for some time, but that would certainly change that character of that area for that stretch. So through the plan tools we have, we can't go back in time. You know, what's either been developed or been allowed in the past is always grandfathered. But what the proposed plan is doing is attempting to provide a bit of incentives for those lands to be re-subdivided into larger lots, at least 22 meter wide in this case, to almost match the 24 meter wide requirements in the area, and to provide an incentive to provide some flexibility to be able to build buildings containing up to 4 units, provided they meet some controls to be able to at least resemble one of the large homes in the area, including having a pitched roof and only 1 door in front, and landscaping requirements. So and under the current draft, it's proposed as an as-of-right process, not a development agreement tool, because I think all the factors are known. We can kind of set the standards in terms of side setbacks and height, and also implement some architectural controls right in the land use bylaw. So it's a bit of a balancing to kind of recognize that the subdivision has taken place, and that that vacant lands can be developed, but providing another option to be able to encourage the re-subdivision of land into larger lots, and to enable some modest density in the area that more closely matches the development pattern in the area.
Very interesting, Ben. Thank you. I have seen your team come forward with many innovative approaches working with developers. So we will look forward to something positive coming out of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lois. Does anybody else have anything that they want to ask? Any other questions?
Could I ask one
yes,
more?
You may absolutely go ahead.
And this relates to the public comments that were coming in. I noticed there are meetings planned for September. Will they address the areas of concern that were identified in those responses from community groups? Is there another mechanism for the city HRM talking to those groups? Schmidtville, Friends of the Commons, I think were in there. How does HRM intend to continue the discussion with those groups?
Thanks for the question and opportunity to clarify again through the chair. I guess there's a couple of avenues, but at this point, I'll kind of clarify where we are in the process. Is I think, as I mentioned in the presentation, it has been a long journey, and there's been a lot of consultation along the way. And for package B, we concluded our broad-based engagement at the end of December. So we've taken a lot of the good feedback we received in the months and over the course of the year 2020, and have made a number of different changes to the documents, I guess, that planning staff feel responds to the good feedback we received. At this point, we don't have any further engagements planned, other than, should council be ready, a public hearing that would have to be held before council approval. And I think that's what you mentioned in terms of September. And otherwise, I think what you're seeing is different community members and also landowners sending letters to the various review committees right now. So as staff, we are in dialogue with different interests and landowners, but any changes to the documents need to be made through the committee and review process. So this is why I think you're getting letters about the center plan, because they're looking to this committee and other committees to recommend changes to council that respond to the request, so that respond to the concern. So just to reiterate, I guess staff we're having dialogue and clarifying with residents, but the formal kind of engagement phase is now concluded. It's really in the committees and council's hand to direct potential changes in response to the information you're seeing in the staff reports, and also any letters that you may be getting as well.
Thank you again, Ben.
In light of that, there are kind of two approaches I think we could take with the correspondence that was received. We could make the choice to read all of these onto the record so that we can decide to make a recommendation either for or against the concerns that are being voiced. Or we can go back and take a little bit more time to read through these and take the time to, in the interim between if we wanted to have a next meeting with the center plan team, to then have some sort of motion crafted on and have our opinions on each of these listed. I'm not sure if there's procedurally, Simon, I might need some guidance here.
So we would be able to potentially just defer the this motion to a future meeting of HAC. I just want to make sure that I do communicate regarding timelines effectively. There is currently, I believe that the plan at the moment is to aim to bring this presentation to CPAD at their that'd be their July meeting. So based on that, our upcoming meeting for HAC, the future meeting should be, sorry, I have my tabs open here.
No problem.
Here we are. Yeah, tentatively, we would be looking to a next scheduled meeting, June 23rd. That does give us time potentially at that meeting to have further discussion, and should the committee be ready at that time to make the motion, that can still make the July meeting of CPED without a risk of running over the timelines.
Okay, thanks, Simon. I'm not sure does anybody in the committee have any feeling on whether or not we should read these onto the record now and try to make a decision, or whether we want to push this conversation, take a little bit more time to read through, push this conversation till later. I know that this is a lot of information to take in. Marisha, did you want to go ahead?
I appreciate the opportunity to take a little bit more time with the center plan. And to consider the communications. I'm just thinking about the thud that it made on my my step when it got dropped off, which reflects the amount of work that everyone has put into this, which is an incredibly impressive document. But I think being an informed member of a committee, I would feel more comfortable taking some time to actually bring forward some motions.
Okay, thanks, Marisha. Anybody else have any thoughts on this?
Madam Chair, I would agree with that.
Thanks, Sandra. Jennifer?
I completely agree also. I would very much appreciate a little bit more time to look at it.
Okay.
I would agree.
Oh, thanks, Leslie, sorry. Okay, so it sounds like we're looking at maybe taking a little bit more time. I want to be really, clear that we want to arrive at this next meeting with, these are a series of things that we'd like to see answered or that we'd like to see dealt with. I know that is challenging because this is, as you've all said, a very large document, and it's not necessarily something that we're all accustomed to reading all the time. I'm thinking that we should probably read the correspondence, since there's not a ton. I'd say there's probably 4 or 5 letters pertaining to this. I think we should probably read these onto the record so that we can say that we've considered the correspondence and that we are going to defer and make a decision on what we might recommend in this correspondence in the coming meeting.
Madam Chair, if I can, I should also mention that it's also potentially an option for the committee to forward the forward the correspondence to CPED if that's something that Chair feels or Chair Committee feels is more appropriate, or that there are potentially items arising from that correspondence where there's a desire for requests for staff reports or things of that nature.
Okay, so Simon, would you then recommend that we read this correspondence, consider it, and then decide whether to pass it to CPED as something that they might make a decision on, or whether we just decide to pass the correspondence on to CPED?
It's certainly much of the correspondence is directly submitted to HAC, so I think it makes sense to discuss it, but it's up to the committee, of course.
Okay. Okay. What are the feelings on me reading all of these onto the record? No feelings. Okay.
I don't know if that's standard or not, but I feel like if they took enough time to write these letters in, that perhaps we should record them for the record somehow. So I
should just mention that the clerk's office will, as part of our follow-up for this meeting, we do include the names of the folks that did write correspondence. So that will be captured and logged accordingly. If there's specific points of view expressed that the committee wants to identify and to speak regarding and to discuss as a policy matter, that's certainly something that can be done at this meeting.
Right. So you would record that the correspondence was received and who it was received from, but not necessarily the contents of the correspondence.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Okay. Well, in that case, I think we should at least go through each of the letters. So if everybody could get these packages open. If anybody doesn't have one, please let me know. I'm going to share my screen. Is that okay?
I should mention we probably shouldn't screen share the correspondence just because it does potentially have identifying
Oh, I
information
didn't realize
that
it wasn't
we would.
circulated publicly. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I won't screen share then.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, if everybody could pull up the, Simon, was there one package where all of it came through at once? I think that there was.
There was one email where I distributed the four separate packages, but unfortunately I didn't combine them just out of risk of confusion.
No, that's okay. Okay, so I think if everybody could pull it up, we'll start with the first item of correspondence. Simon, is it okay for us to identify it by the person who wrote in?
Yep, by name should be fine. We just don't want to publicly distribute people's unredacted emails or things of that nature.
Right. Okay, fair enough. That makes sense. Okay, so the first one that I have is one that Lois brought up initially in the earlier in the meeting, which was with regards to a Norfolk, Virginia. I think that my understanding is that has been dealt with by the mayor's office. So I think we'll move on from that one. At the top of your, at least I'm going to go from this, the title of this package or the title of this document is called 210602 HAC 71 COR. So that's what we're going through right now. I think there are two items of correspondence in this, if I'm correct. One just has a lot of attachments to it. So the first is again that Norfolk, Virginia one that's been dealt with by the mayor's office. So we're going to leave that off from what we're going to discuss. The second is from William Breckenridge, who is a former member of the Heritage Advisory Committee regarding 1142 and 1144 South Park Street. So in this letter, I believe the gist of it, there's also something about 1195 Tower Road. Okay, so I think if we look at attachment, the first attachment here, there are several 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 8 properties that Mr. Breckenridge is expressing concern with the fact that these are not being looked at under, I believe, either heritage conservation districts and are also not registered and have maybe been zoned in such a way that he believes that they might be at risk for demolition. So they're again not non-registered properties. Does everybody have this letter, and does anybody want to speak to any of the properties on it or make any recommendations to the further committees that would be considering our recommendations? Lois, go right ahead.
I'm wondering if that letter might be deferred to the next meeting of the HAC. It really does not focus on the center plan. It's concern about orphan buildings in the South End, and we could discuss it, Madam Chair, at the next meeting and make a recommendation or ask staff then. That would be my suggestion.
Sure. That makes sense. And I think I agree. My understanding is that the concern is, as it pertains to center plan, is that not only are these buildings not registered, but they've maybe been zoned for something that would incentivize redevelopment. I'm not sure if staff has any input on what our approach might be there. I think Lois is likely right that this would be a more of an investigation into registering these buildings rather than requesting that the zoning under center plan be changed for these specific properties. Can somebody provide assistance on that?
I think I should defer to planning staff on that question.
I think so too. Yeah.
Thanks. As you're talking, I was trying to pull up the correspondence and take a look at it. So I don't have it in front of me, and I don't know of. I'm wondering if either Aaron Murnahan or Cash Hodo online might be more familiar with these sites who are online and could be able to speak to it, right?
Sure.
Hi, Madam Chair. The first part of your question just cut out a little bit. Which properties in particular are we referring to?
So I think we're currently talking about the several properties that are being referred to in William Breckenridge's letter, which he points out are both non-registered and have been zoned for development. So including Simon, if my screen doesn't show the address, like email addresses or anything identifying the correspondee, can I share it?
I would just out of an abundance of caution avoid that, but yeah, sorry.
Okay, so the properties that are in this letter that he's included in an attachment here include 1195 Tower Road, 5706 and 5710 South Street, 5497 Victoria Road, 5493 Victoria Road, 1070 Lucknow Street, 1029 Tower Road, which I think we agreed on a development agreement for earlier this year, and 1142 and 1144 South Park Street.
So some of those properties fall within package A areas. In fact, many of them might fall within the higher order residential designation. And because the Victoria Road proposed Heritage Conservation District came in very late in the game, it was decided not to change any of the zoning on those properties. But if they aren't currently registered, you know, we would always be open to working with property owners or working with the Heritage Advisory Committee to consider, you know, evaluating those properties on a case-by-case basis. But from a heritage standpoint, where they're not registered currently, there wouldn't be any effect on their proposed zoning under Central Plan Package A or B.
So the Victoria Road HCD area or proposed HCD area has not been downzoned like the rest of the potential HCD areas.
The areas of that proposed HCD that fall within the Package B areas, the established residential designation, have been downzoned. However, the portions that fall within the higher order residential, the corridor designation were not.
Okay, was there a reason for that?
That was the list of proposed heritage conservation districts that came through as part of Package A. There was consultation that was undertaken with the public before my starting in my role at HRM. In consultation with members of the public in that area of the city, it was determined that, you know, we were missing something in that area, which ended up becoming what's now the Victoria Road proposed Heritage Conservation District. But because that was added much later to the plan and did not undertake much public consultation earlier on, you know, there was likely some decisions made not to go in and downzone those properties after the fact. And maybe, you know, Ben could expand on that a little bit more if he likes. I wasn't directly part of that discussion, but.
Well, I think if I'm looking at it correctly, the ER areas are the majority of these properties that are listed here would be ER1 or ER2 or ER3 areas. But there's the Tower Road South, which is on the corner of Tower and South, and then the two South Street properties, and then a couple on South Park that would be zoned either HR or core. I don't think they'd be corridor, but they'd be HR. So I think that those are probably the ones that are, if I can extrapolate from this letter, I think those are probably the ones of the greatest concern to this committee, at least. I'll let whoever.
Yeah, so again, we would certainly always be open to working with property owners to consider those properties for formal protection as registered properties. But also as we come forward to begin work on that Heritage Conservation District, we would then be determining what properties get included. And of course, once the Heritage Conservation District is in place, those properties would essentially be rezoned to the new Heritage Conservation District zoning, whatever that will be, and they'll be protected under the Heritage Property Act.
Right. I'm just looking at the Victoria Road HCD boundaries here. Okay, those ones would fall outside of it. So those ones, okay. So I think what we've arrived at here is that it's, what I'm hearing is that it's unlikely that the corridor areas specifically, or the areas that were designated for more residential density, would be down zoned or would be redesignated at this point. And therefore maybe they haven't been included in this potential HCD. So our avenue then would be to look at these for formal registration.
From my point of view, yes. I'd allow the center plan team if they've got other thoughts on that. But from the point of view of the heritage team, it would be formal designation that would provide the best protection for those properties, and would allow the committee as well to evaluate them for their heritage value, because at this point there's not a lot known. There hasn't been research done on those properties by staff. So
Ben, your hand is up. Did you want to chime in?
Yes, thank you, and thanks Aaron for jumping in and helping me answer the question there. I think I'll probably say the same thing Aaron said, maybe a slightly different way. Is just about the reason for not including package A areas in these proposed HCs comes down to a lot of to the scope of work. Package A was a long process, and it had its own consultation and proposed a number of different heritage preservation measures. Package B was focused on the lower density areas. And so given that council's already made some hard decisions about density and height, we did at the 11th hour did not feel that it was within scope to propose an HCD on lands that were included in package A. So that's the reason why those newly proposed HCDs really only focus on the low density areas and kind of don't apply to the higher order residential areas that were already decisions are already made in package A.
Thanks, Ben. That absolutely makes sense procedurally. Okay, so that is that letter. Does anybody else have anything else that they wanted to say on that? I think that's something that we could, as Lois said at the beginning, maybe park and have a discussion about in the context of the HAC and what we might like to recommend or look into for those properties. Does that sound okay to everybody? Or it sounds okay to nobody.
I'm in favor of it.
Okay, let's go with that then. Thanks. I don't need an actual vote. That's just fine. Okay, so let's agree to park that, and we'll get to that maybe outside of the context of center plan. The next letter, so I'm in the second document now. It's 210602 HAC 71 COR2, so correspondence package 2. This also says item 7.1 at the top of it. We have another letter here that is from the members of the Schmidtville Stakeholder Steering Committee, which was the committee that helped staff to arrive at the HCD, the policies in the HCD. Based on this letter, and I think that this is probably something that staff could speak to a little bit about maybe where this concern is coming from. There seems to be some concern that the center plan is presenting challenges to the Schmidtville HCD or may make changes to the Schmidtville HCD that wouldn't have been discussed in the context of that committee that was made to create the HCD or to help create the HCD. I don't know, Ben, if you wanted to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. And I'll answer on a high level, but I see Aaron's from the videos, and he might have more details to provide. But the short answer to this one, I think we were able to clarify with this resident that there are no significant changes proposed for the Schmidtville HCD. I think it's partly it's a change of a different format, going from the Peninsula Land Use Bylaw and that format into the Regional Center Land Use Bylaw, and the intent is to carry everything forward. And I believe that was the case, although they might have picked up on a little bit of something that could be clarified in the land use bylaw that we can correct going forward. And so, I mean, the intent is to carry it forward as is without significant changes. And I think we're able to clarify the resident, but Aaron might have more details to be able to provide about the specific letter.
Sure. So myself and Kasia Toda from the center plan team met with that particular resident last week and actually went through point by point their concerns, and were able to determine that most of those concerns really weren't warranted, that there was just some misunderstanding of how the regulations were transferred over from the municipal land use bylaw into center plan. But I think there was one issue with one of the schedules that discusses mixed use properties or commercial residential properties. And that will simply be a small change to the schedules. Kasia would be able to comment on how that change would be made going through the approval process.
Sure, thanks, Aaron. Through Madam Chair, yes, exactly. So we were able to identify one minor mapping change, one of the schedules, to identify properties that can have commercial uses. And that can be brought forward through staff. We expect to have supplementary report going forward to committee of the whole, and there will be a small number of errors that staff can bring forward. So that's something that we are committed to do. But otherwise, I think we left the meeting with a number of the members, with William Breckenridge in particular, as they were satisfied that we carried forward all of the policies and regulations.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. That's very helpful to contextualize that letter. Okay, so we're moving on to the third package here, which is the title of this package is 210602 HAC 71 COR 3. Also says item 7.1 at the top of it here. The first item of correspondence is from Janet Morris, who was also a former member of this committee. I'm going to try to briefly go into what this says. So Ms. Morris has expressed that given the plan will ultimately be presented for consideration of the legislature, I propose that the plan be presented together with the request for removal of the 3-year pause period under Section 18 of the Heritage Property Act. So that what she's referring to is the clause wherein when somebody applies to demolish a registered heritage property and it is denied by the committee and by council, they need only to wait 3 years following that, which is meant to give staff and other heritage advocates a chance to try to work with them to restore the registered heritage property, and then following that they can demolish it after those 3 years, even if it was denied. So that's what Janet's referring to there. I think she's asking for the removal of that at the same time that center plan is being brought forward. So I'm not sure, staff can probably speak to that. And then the second is that although it's pleasing to see an addition of another 3 proposed heritage districts, there are many buildings and spaces in the plan with community and heritage significance that will still have no recognition. I would ask committees recommend that the buildings of pre-World War II vintage have demolition controls incorporated in the plan. Model to work from would that be imposed by the city of Vancouver for pre-1940 buildings? This would give a pause to consider what are we doing for this sort of destruction. I think that we could probably speak to the first item first.
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. So as most of the committee certainly knows, the municipality gets their power to protect heritage properties through the Heritage Property Act of Nova Scotia, which is provincial legislation. That piece of legislation has not undergone any updating since about 2010 was the last time. There were a number of amendments to that legislation that were being requested by the municipality in 2015, and those we were of the understanding were forthcoming. One of those changes is the removal of Section 18 of the Heritage Property Act, which is that 3-year rule. Recently, Council directed staff to work with our provincial counterparts to try and bring those amendments to fruition. We're still having those conversations, and those conversations will continue through the Culture and Heritage Priorities Plan project, which is ongoing right now. But it's still unknown how high of a priority that is for the province and when those amendments might actually take place. So essentially, without amendments to the actual legislation at the provincial level, there's no ability for the municipality to prevent those properties from being demolished if that's the intent of the owner after a 3-year waiting period.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. That's a good update on that.
And in terms of the pre-1914 buildings, essentially that really falls into the same category. That would require legislative change because an owner would be able to legally demolish a property under the Building Code Act. However, there's no ability for us to prevent that demolition unless those properties are actually registered under the Heritage Property Act. Otherwise, it's, if they're able to receive a demolition permit from the municipality, then they can legally demolish, and we cannot withhold a demolition permit if they meet the conditions of the Building Code Act. So again, another change to the provincial legislation would be required for us to have that power.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Anybody have anything that they wanted to add on that? Lois?
Would it be sufficient, Aaron, for a letter to go to Ms. Morris? Or is there some way that we can navigate this to take the requirement off your team of writing the letter? Could you provide some direction for us here? If not you, then Simon.
I would say any additional help that this committee through either CPED or regional council would always be appreciated and can certainly help to bolster our discussions with the province. I would likely say, and I would leave that to Simon maybe, that it would be a motion to ask the mayor and regional council to issue a letter to the province just inquiring about the progress in their amendments to the Heritage Property Act.
Yeah, this is Simon just jumping in, speaking through you, Madam Chair, to the committee. I believe that would be the appropriate measure if that was something that the committee were intending. It would be a recommendation to CPED and then through CPED to regional council for a letter from the mayor. That's usually how requests to the province are made.
Okay, Madam Chair, thank you.
Sorry.
Simon.
Well, where do you want to land on that, Lois? Do we want to defer that and maybe have it on our agenda for next time that we may want to provide a letter of that sort?
I think that might be the best way to proceed. It's getting late in the day. We will have some minutes. My thanks to the team already who are taking care of that. I think the next meeting.
Madam Chair, we'd be happy as staff to bring forward some information for the committee to consider, just a little background on the discussions with the province to date and some of the direction we've received from regional council.
Sure, that would be great. I think that would help us to contextualize our letter if we are, or our request to regional council, that is.
Thank you, Aaron, from me as well. That will give our committee an update on where things stand with the province, knowing how slowly these things move, being part of that department at one point.
Thanks, Lois. Okay, so that is that item of correspondence. The next is from Beverly and Bob Miller. My Adobe Acrobat is frozen, so I'm going to go through this one quite slowly. So this has been sent to all of the committees, and so I'm actually not sure that this is something that HAC need consider. It seems that it pertains specifically to the commons and parks and recreational facilities in general. Although there is some mention of North End neighborhoods in the Iville area, raising concerns about lower rise buildings being demolished to promote higher rise buildings, that sort of thing. My sense is that this one is less of an HAC matter and more of a CDAC or CPED or even council matter that they can consider. Does anybody want to share any thoughts on that? Are we okay to move on from that one?
I would recommend we move on from that one.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Give me a second here. I need to shut down my PDF viewer and reopen it, or reopen that correspondence. Sorry, everybody. My apologies. It's installing an update now. Does anybody else have this in front of them and can maybe summarize the next correspondence while I try to get my computer back up in shape here? Just a reminder, we're in 21060 to HAC 71 COR 3.
And just to provide context, I believe we would be looking next in that package at correspondence from Alan North. I shouldn't be the one to editorialize any of the content of it, though.
Okay, I do need somebody to do that because my Adobe Acrobat has decided to install an update right now.
Jeez.
I can give it a shot, and I picked the one with the longest letter too. There.
Yeah, sorry, Marisha. Thank you very much. Just maybe you just pick out a couple sentences. And read
Okay,
them,
this is the letter from Alan North that was brought up earlier, and the questions around the components with the draft. Sorry, it's around Yonge Avenue. Between the MPS and the draft MPS and the other ones and there. So page 79 2.8.11 concerning the lot frontage and the land use bylaw in the concerns with this. And he's concerned about the minimum lot frontage of 80 feet, which reduces the minimum lot width for the sub area from 80 feet to 72 feet, which allows 4 unit buildings on each lot, which he believes will allow 5 quadplexes on 72-foot lots, which he believes is a concession to allow the owner of the vacant lot to fit 5 quadplexes neatly in his 360 feet of frontage, and then wants to maintain the 80-foot lot width. And then concerned about the land use bylaw reducing, the front yard setback from the long established 40 feet down to 26 feet. And again, going to those 5 permitted quadplexes, which he believes would be 14 feet closer to the street than any other house on the avenue, which is not in scale or character with the larger than average lot frontages that are outlined in 2.8.11. The 40-foot setback is an essential character defining element for the streetscape, and with the new and significantly reduced 26-foot setback, this raises issues, so he's pushing for the 40-foot minimum setback. To summarize, there's where I should have gone in the first place. Sub area Yonge Avenue should comply with the rest of Yonge Avenue special area conditions. The Yonge Avenue District Heritage Conservation Society would be in agreement with 2 or 3 units on 80-foot lots with a maximum of 35% lot coverage and 40-foot front yard setback like every other house, and asks to revise the land use bylaw to ensure vision of the MPS is honored with these inconsistencies. Thank you. Sorry.
Thanks so much, Marisha. I'm back up and running now. Okay, so I think that staff addressed this when we were having a discussion about the Yonge Avenue special area conditions as well, or I mean earlier, that is. Does anybody want to add anything else about this or contextualize anything here or ask staff anything else? Okay, it doesn't sound like we're really looking to dive too much further into that. I will say 72-foot lots are still very, very large lots in the context of the city of Halifax and especially the peninsula of Halifax. So that's something to keep in mind as we go through these.
Madam Chair, do we need to respond to him or how does that work?
I don't believe that the committees have any onus to respond to the correspondence, but only to consider it. Simon, maybe you can clarify that.
Yes, that's correct. Committees can just take correspondence and for information value, if the committee wishes to take specific actions arising from that correspondence, that's certainly their prerogative, but they can all just be taken for information purposes.
Okay. Is that something that you would like to do, Sandra? That you feel that we should respond to him, or?
No, Madam Chair, I was just curious about the protocol or
Sure.
the practice. I
Sure. Okay.
needed information.
And our current meeting is live, so that all the individuals who submitted correspondence could absolutely be watching our meeting to understand what our thoughts are on that. So am I okay to say that we've heard from staff on that, and we are satisfied with their interpretation and their decisions on this one?
I still question
Yes, a little bit of
Madam Chair, I still question the setback being different from what has traditionally been done. I have an issue with that.
Okay. Are there any recommendations that you might like to make, or is that something that we might want to talk about at our next meeting when we go into Senate Plan a little bit more?
I think, Madam Chair, the next meeting would be appropriate for that.
Sure. Cassandra, sorry, you had spoken up first. Did you want to go ahead?
Oh, no, just on the lot with that, I think the intensification is something that none of us like, but we have to accept it. This is a city that's going to grow a lot faster over the next 25 to 40 years. And 80 to 72 is, I don't see as a problem. It's a lot less intensification that many cities across Canada are doing.
Thanks, Cassandra. Lois, did you want to?
Yes, this is just echoes what I said earlier, Madam Chair. I think it is the setback that is the primary concern. The lot width, not, as you say, 80 to 72 is not serious. Well, yes, it's acceptable. It is the 26-foot setback. I don't know that 40 feet is essential as a character defining element, but quadplexes, 5 of them, 14 feet closer to the street than any other house on the avenue, may raise issues. That's not very far back. 26 feet is not far back from the sidewalk, especially if you've got a quadplex that's going to be, and I'm not certain here, Aaron, I think it's 4 or 5 stories high as initially proposed. I don't know where it is now. That looms. It suggests New York style housing, as in perhaps tenement, or it's just perhaps not appropriate for Yonge Avenue, given that it is a landscape of cultural significance.
Understood. We can, if we want to, put this to a motion for C. I think it's CDAC that's going to consider things. Am I right?
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
No, not you. Sorry, I'm talking to, I think to staff. I think is it CDAC that's going to consider motions that we make, or is it CPED that's going to consider motions that we make?
Sorry, that will be CPED.
CPED. Okay, so CDAC and HAC are going to make recommendations to CPED. CPED is going to consider those and then pass things to council.
That is correct.
Okay.
That would be, sorry to interrupt, it might be most appropriate to move it along to them.
Oh, I see, to forward this concern. Yeah. Well, I mean, so Simon, in the context of forwarding a recommendation or even a concern for CPED's consideration, would it make sense for us to make a motion to ask CPED to consider this request, or it's specifically pertaining to the, I think the setback here is the thing that committee members are most concerned with?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the committee. I think that where there's a couple of different options, of course, but if there's a desire just to forward the concerns or the proposals within the correspondence to CPED, then the correspondence can just be forwarded to CPED for information purposes. If there's a desire for the committee to tailor a specific recommendation around this issue, that may be of benefit to crafting a motion of recommendation to CPED that could potentially give direction in terms of what CPED would wish to consider for final amendments to the center plan.
In light of time, I think I'll say let's reconsider that at our next meeting when we're going to discuss anything that we've deferred from this meeting. I know that we're about 15 minutes out from our extra long meeting and everybody probably wants to go and have some dinner. So I'm going to move on to the next item of correspondence. I think we'll get through maybe as many as we can, and we can we'll kind of close out with any additional questions that we have for staff just to contextualize, if that makes sense, everybody. So the next is from Carol Betts. It looks as though the, one second here, heritage designation of the stretch of Brunswick Street outlined on map 20 is justified. So that's an agreement. Street is a mix of buildings. This district, as are others at a crossroads, a point where crucial decision must be made that will have far-reaching consequences. The districts are also at a point where there's potential to become models for many of the innovative ideas being put forward. Historical Halifax is the cornerstone of this city and creates a major tourism draw, and is most important that unique heritage districts retain their personality. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out what the request is here. This is also time as debates continue on the way forward for the city to sharpen pencils, go back to the drawing board and look at models such as Freiburg, Germany, Vauban district that has been reconstructed medieval town, but is now also known as the world's most successful model for sustainable urban living. I think that this is a broader consideration on the way that heritage is broadly being considered in center plan, which I think is something that we're going to get into at our next meeting a little bit, again, in terms of how we consider properties that aren't currently registered that might be zoned for some redevelopment, and how we as a committee might provide input into how those get treated in the coming years. I'm going to move on from that one unless anybody wants to object to that. Okay. The next is from, oh, shoot, sorry. Oh, I think this is also from Carol Betts, sorry. So this is specifically concerning the St. Patrick's Alexandra site in the North End. I do believe that this one is addressed to Councillor Smith, so this will be considered specifically by Regional Council and or CDAC and probably CPED as well. And I don't think that it is specifically something that concerns HAC. So unless anybody wants to talk about the St. Pat's Alexandra site, I think we'll move on from that and let that be considered by other committees. Oh, Councillor Stoddard, go ahead.
I was just looking further down. It looks like Councillor Smith did respond to Ms. Betts. So maybe we can. Oh, yeah. We don't have to look at this anymore.
Sure. Yeah, it looks like he may be on top of that.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Stoddard.
You're welcome.
And actually further to that, it looks as though this, yeah, the rest of the correspondence is actually the replies from that thread. So thank you, Councillor, for pointing that out. Okay, that concludes the correspondence that the committee received on this topic, or correspondence that the committee received for this meeting. I'm cognizant that we've got about 10 minutes left in our meeting, but I want to give an opportunity to the committee again to ask staff questions while we have them here that may help you to better understand what it is specifically you should be looking at when you're further reviewing these materials and the correspondence in the coming few weeks that we have between this and our next meeting. Are there any items of clarification that you may want from staff about what you should be looking at, what maybe the committee may be most concerned about or most interested in reviewing, and anything when you're thinking about, future procedural things that the committee may be involved in, anything that you may have questions about pertaining to those. So I'm going to open the floor back up to the committee briefly. We are a talkative bunch tonight.
Are we able, it's Cassandra, are we able to get a copy of Ben's PowerPoint presentation? I'd love to be able to go through that again.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the committee. I will be with the agenda posting the presentation to the web following this meeting, and I can also circulate a link to the presentation following that as well to all members of the committee.
Thank you, Simon.
Lois?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering if Aaron and Ben and the rest of the team, if there are certain areas that you would recommend that we could be helpful in commenting on or discussing at the next meeting, because I'm also cognizant that, and I alluded to this earlier as well, that your team is very, very good working with developers to mitigate and to come up with more innovative approaches. And we don't want to go down seemingly rabbit holes that may not be productive. So if you were perhaps able to suggest areas where we could specifically comment the next meeting that impact on culture and heritage.
Do you want to start, Ben, or do you want me to mention a few?
You go ahead. Thanks for.
Thanks, Lois, and through Madam Chair to you. I would say one of the most powerful tools that we have within this secondary plan is the Heritage Development Agreement policy, CHR 7. So I would have a look at that policy and the relating policies that follow it. Also, the areas within the culture and heritage chapter that deal with heritage conservation districts, that will be obviously another powerful tool for us to use. And that list of proposed heritage districts, I would say, having a look at that would be important as well. And the heritage design requirements within the land use bylaw would be the other section that I would pay some close attention to.
Thank you, Aaron. That's helpful.
Aaron, it's Patty. I'm just wondering, the pieces you were referencing, is there any way we can kind of get a direct link to that just to help people locate it quickly? Or page numbers or something? Someone can share that.
I could probably email the committee with the page numbers for the culture and heritage chapter of the secondary plan. It's not a hugely long chapter, but I would strongly recommend that everyone on the committee read the entire chapter.
Okay, so all those pieces, the policies, the conservation design districts, the proposed heritage districts, and the design requirements are all within the same chapter?
That's right, within the secondary plan. And then there is specific sections in the draft land use bylaw as well that I mentioned, and we can send some references to those sections to the committee.
I think that would be useful and make good use of everybody's time. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Anybody want to add anything else here?
If I can just jump in for a minute, Madam Chair,
Sure.
through you to the committee. If there are, if members of the committee are considering potential recommendations or motions, if there's a desire to do so, you can always send those any early drafts to me ahead of time, and I would not be assisting in terms of like crafting any of the recommendations as much as assisting in terms of providing formatting assistance and possibly communicating those with staff ahead of time if we have them.
That's great. Thank you, Simon. So yes, if anybody has anything that is percolating in their brain and they'd like to put it out in writing and have some assistance with that in advance, that would certainly move our next meeting along a lot more quickly. Not that we've been here for too long. Okay, so without further ado, I think that we've kind of covered everything that we can for this evening. Oh, Lois, go ahead.
Sorry, that was a mistake.
No. Oh, okay, no problem. Okay, so in that sense, I think we are going to be deferring the remainder of this conversation and the rest of the questions that we would have for staff and any recommendations that we might want to make on item 9.1.1 to our next meeting. With that said, item 9.2 on our agenda is items from members of the Heritage Advisory Committee. There are none on this month's agenda. Item 10 is motions and discussion. There were also none. We will defer any motions that we make to our next meeting. Added items, I don't believe that there are any. So the date of our next meeting is June 23rd, 2021. So that will be in a little less than, oh no, just 2 weeks time. So we'll see you all in 2 weeks and we will talk about Centre Plan again. I think that now all I need is a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Thank you, Lois.
A second.
Seconded by Councillor Stoddard. Okay, thank you, everybody. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
All right. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair. Thank you, city staff.
Yes, thank you very much to staff. That was very excellent and informative. Very helpful.
Thank you all.
Staff, and thank you, committee members. Have a good evening.
Bye, everyone.